Welcome to Between Over and Next with your hosts, Holli and Robert, a happily married couple who explore the space between what was, what is, and what's to come. From career changes to navigating life's uncertainties, this dynamic duo will empower you to live your happiest life at every age and stage. So, get ready because your journey with Holli and Robert starts now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Between Over and Next. Hi, Holli.
Hi, Robert.
On today's episode of Between Over and Next, we have our guest, Stu Zakim, who's immersed in the world of PR. Stu, even from a young age, was immediately involved in the whole celebrity world, from film to music to publishing, and being thrust into that world at a very young age, and has great stories to share. I think you're really going to enjoy his journey and his pivot in his career.
And what's really cool is he has transitioned into the cannabis sector.
Yep.
That's how we met.
Exactly.
And he has his own PR firm where he does represent a number of clients in that space. But importantly, he's an advocate. He wants to educate others. And he is committed to bringing cannabis into people's lives for good.
Right. And to erase the stigma that's attached.
And he's had such a successful career leading up to this moment in time. Honeysuckle Magazine recently named him the Emperor of PR.
Right.
So that's worthy of being on Between Over and Next.
As Stu will explain to you, and we are firm believers in connections, and that to me, it's kind of the golden rule for success in anything, is having a good network of people who support you emotionally, people who support you professionally as mentors. Mentorship is very important to Stu as it is to us. So it resonates on a number of levels for us, which is why we want you to meet Stu Zakim. Hi, Stu. It's so good to see you. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
I know that you're very busy these days, and you're actually heading in for a hit on CNN later today. So we appreciate you keeping your appointment with us
You're
for this podcast.
You're on the same level as CNN.
Yeah, well, listen, it's...
Flattered.
You've had a very long, illustrious career in various aspects of entertainment and communications across publications and television, and with some really famous, recognizable people, yet you've had some monumental pivots throughout your career. So take us through a couple of those moments where you stopped and you took note of this change in your trajectory with these pivots.
So when I graduated Boston University's College of Communications, I got my first job in New York in a way that doesn't exist anymore. Employment agencies where you would go in and take a typing test, no matter what you went to school for, and in some cases, dictation test. I did an internship at a very small Boston PR firm who had an account that was the local broadcast of the Jerry Lewis Telethon, which people may not remember used to be on every Labor Day on Channel 5 or Channel 9 or both for a long time. And so this guy says, we have an opening at a publisher, a book publisher, and a major manufacturer of movies, television, and music. I'm like, I think that one sounds good. No name, so couldn't do any homework, just gives me the address. Fifth Avenue and 5711 Fifth Avenue. So I had not really been in the city much during my 4 years in college. And I walked from Port Authority to Fifth Avenue. And when I get to 5th and 56, it's Nat Sherman's tobacco store. I'm like, this can't be it. So I walk a little further, and it says Columbia Pictures. So I'm like, wow. And I go in, meet the recruiting guy. Once again, another typing test, another dictation test, because this was the entry-level job. It was going to be, it actually had a union classification of clerk typist, because it was a union job. And so I go meet the head of the department, who was probably our age then, you know, with your portfolio of all the things you did in school. And his first question, why do you want to be in this for business? I'm like, are you crazy? The movie business? Why wouldn't I want to be in the movie business? Then he made me wait for the next person to interview, which would be one of my more direct bosses, who was the senior publicist. So she's on the phone, and I'm looking at her bulletin board, and she's got all these people's names and numbers on it, and has a very sexy voice. And she hangs up the phone, and she looks at me, and we shake hands, and the first question is, so what sign are you? Yeah, this is 1978. I tell her my son, oh, we're very compatible. And that went on great. There was one more person for me to meet. And in those days, of course, we had no cell phones. So I get home. My mom says, oh, you have a call from Columbia Pictures. You better call them back. So they offered me a job. One day, it was right place, right time. But nevertheless, set my career on this path, this journey that you want to talk about, Robert. And I stayed there for 8.5 years, which I got as far as I could go without getting the job I wanted, which was to run the office. And so I was offered a job at Dino De Laurentiis, who was a famous film producer, was launching his own studio. I got hired to be director of publicity for them in New York. Lasted a year and a half, 2. I get a call from Jan Wenner, who was the creator of Rolling Stone magazine, and I had worked with him when I was at Columbia on a movie that was generated by a Rolling Stone cover story called Perfect, which starred John Travolta, Jamie Lee Curtis, and Jan Wenner basically playing himself. My office was 56th and 5th. They were 57th and 5th. So I was in charge of the movie. I spent a lot of time with him at the offices. And so he goes, well, you know, it's our 20th anniversary. I'd like you to come work for me. Oh, how do you say, as a person of our generation,
Sure,
who grew up worshiping Rolling Stone and read it religiously and was our guide to rock and roll and politics and everything. I'm
Extraordinary opportunity.
sure. He goes, well, you know, you don't have to meet with me, but you got to meet with, you know, my business partners just to make sure it's all cool. Boom, get that gig. And then I came back to movies because I was given an offer I couldn't refuse. Universal Pictures. Universal offered me to be in charge of production publicity, which meant I would start creating the brand from the moment the movie was announced till production started and through production. And in those days, post-production took somewhat up to a year. And that time, Universal was owned by MCA, started by MCA. So I worked for the legendary Lou Wasserman and Sid Sheinberg. And then I got recruited by Playboy from there because Christy Hefner, Hef's daughter, wanted to make Playboy an adult entertainment company, but not an adult entertainment with, you know, sex, but adult entertainment, gaming, and all those things for 21 plus.
So what was that span of time that you just described to us?
20 years.
What were the lessons that you took that were able to get you from that entry level into the executive level? What were some of the things that stood out to you?
When I started working, most people in management were our age. There was no, you know, people in their 30s that were running departments and responsible for all that. It wasn't just the way it was. And when I became a senior publicist at 24, which was significant in those days because I had started as an assistant at 21, one of the things that certainly put me on the map at a very young age, I was the project director for a film called St. Elmo's Fire. With St. Elmo's, when I started pitching stories, and I went to New York Magazine, and I said, you know, would you be interested in the cover story on Emilio Estevez? Because at that point, he was really the leader of that group of actors. And I said, you know, they said, sure. And I talked to the writer. Then I had to speak with his publicist to make sure she was cool with it. I spoke to the director. And I was, you know, what condition is the movie in? Can you show a rough cut to this writer? He's coming out to have dinner with Emilio. He shows him the movie. I call him afterwards. Oh, yeah, it's really good. I thought, okay, great. I go, well, have fun tonight, you know, with Emilio. So then I call him the next day. I says, how was dinner? He goes, you won't believe what happened. I go to pick up Emilio. He goes, you know what? Let's have some fun. Let's go pick up some of my friends. So they go pick up Rob Lowe, they pick up Judd Nelson, pick up somebody else, and they basically go clubbing. And having done that with those actors, you can imagine what the scene was like. Girls all over the place, propositions, all that. And I said, did you have fun? He said, I had a great time. I said, it kind of reminds me like Frank, Sammy, and Dean in Vegas, the Rat
Right.
Pack, but a younger version, like a Brat Pack, just as I'm saying it to you. Boom.
Did they get the cover
There it
story?
was.
It was not only was the cover story, it became the term to define a generation of actors that still defines
right.
them.
Yeah.
Rob Lowe is 60. He still mentioned Rob Lowe, former Brat Packer. Any of those people in that group are. So it came to define a generation. If I hadn't had that previous relationship with Jan Wenner when we made the movie, I doubt that move would have ever happened, but it did. And then that set me on a course through that to be involved with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I ran the press room for 18 years, which I was on the guy on the stage doing Q&A with people just got their awards after they got them. Great photo collections, I'm sure you can imagine.
But you're known for brand repositioning and crisis communications. So explain what both of those things are and just share a couple of examples about them.
So brand positioning is when you launch a product. And that's where you work really closely with the marketing department of whomever you're working with. And because PR and marketing have to work hand in hand, even though we have different functions within the role, we have to play off of each other.
So giving an example of something that you've done in your career that really made an impact.
I would say trying to make Playboy more relevant when it was a dated brand. And what we were able to do was change the kind of merchandise that they were licensing. So Sex and the City played a really big role in that turnaround because Carrie Bradshaw's character started wearing the rabbit head necklace, which that show was, the Bible to a generation of women. And all of a sudden, the stylist who had done that was featuring other kind of Playboy-inspired stuff, and that helped make the brand not only more relevant to advertisers, but brought in a female audience that previously had been reluctant to embrace it.
It illustrates a pivot for a brand, right? Because you think
Correct.
about pivots as individual accomplishments, but really brand pivots are happening all the time, and we're not even necessarily realizing it.
And that's publicity.
That's
Yeah.
the subtlety of effective marketing.
Right.
That you don't even know it's happening. 2009, I went back to publishing, went back to work for Wenner when Us Weekly was kind of faltering. I was brought in to be the liaison between Wenner Media and Disney, which meant I was dealing with Michael Eisner and Bob Iger directly, which is pretty cool. We would give their shows and movies and projects exposure in the magazine. In exchange for that, we'd get access to those people. And also, I was going to do product placement. Within 2 weeks of accepting that position, he put me in charge of the entire company again. So I was overseeing Rolling Stone as well as Men's Journal. And that was a major transition to take. And then I moved over to American Media. But I had a friend who was over at Showtime and said, I have a perfect job for you. And I said, okay. The time was to reposition Showtime as not a second choice to HBO, but as good as HBO, because HBO's hits were ending. Sopranos, Sex and the City, what other signature shows they had then, their runs were over, whereas Showtime was coming up with Weeds, The Tudors, Dexter, hot programming that was measured by increase in subscribers, and had to kind of explain to them how premium TV worked, that because we had a hit show doesn't mean we're going to grow 100 million subscribers overnight, whereas they could sell tons of advertising. It didn't work that way. But it was great, and once again, access to senior management. I always have to have a seat at the table at these levels so that I weigh in on what is going to be effective or not strategically. And you just don't snap your fingers, it's a process.
Did your 21-year-old self anticipate these changes that you experienced through the years?
No, I never in a million years would have thought this would have been my career. My father wanted me to go into business with him and his manufacturing company. I really wanted to be presidential press secretary. That was my dream job. To me, it is the most important and impactful PR position in the world. You influence public opinion, public policy, all kinds of things.
Well, you're an influencer because now you're highly involved in the cannabis industry. And I am curious the lessons you learned, the wisdom that you've achieved, the strategies along the way. How has that been incorporated into your involvement with cannabis?
Well, first of all, I believe my skill set is transferable from one industry to the next. There may be certain tweaks that you have to do, but the general function and how you do it is the same. It's all about relationships, period. And so that skill, which I have a natural ability to generate, certainly is a way to meet new people who I need to cultivate.
So why cannabis?
Well, I've been a consumer for 52 years now, I believe. And in all the jobs I outlined in this podcast here, at Columbia, I worked on a couple of Cheech and Chong films, got high with them. At Universal, Half Baked, which is certainly a classic, but Dave Chappelle and Jim Brewer had offices on my floor. They would get high in my bathroom because I had a private bathroom with the window open. Showtime, I mentioned Weeds. Playboy, Hef was one of the first contributors to Normal. And when I launched my own business, originally my client base was entertainment and media because that's where I came from.
Right.
But I had a friend who was starting a trade association in Washington State as they were going legal, saying, I need some comms help because all these people want to know what they should do in the field and we need to educate them. So that's how I got into cannabis, a very small group of thought leaders at the time who saw the opportunity that cannabis would have. So to me, that was a natural fit and also positioned me as a resource to people in all areas, not just media, but people looking to get in, which would ultimately cultivate into clients, or just to be an influencer to what you said earlier. And that clearly is where I'm at now. You know, I've won 6 Clios on behalf of my clients in the cannabis space, one for PR specifically with the travel agency. And then very recently I was highlighted in Honeysuckle magazine, and they called me the Emperor of PR.
Well, you know, it's obvious as you talk about your career that you really leveraged your relationships and who you got to meet, and understanding that that's probably the most valuable thing that you have are those people that
Absolutely.
you know, because you obviously took it all with you to cannabis, which now allows you to not only wear the PR hat, but now you're educating, right? You're adding that. Could you have done that 25 years ago? I mean, I'm a firm believer in building that toolbox.
Right.
You know, and I think at our age now, we're able to do things that we maybe couldn't do 20 years ago.
To your point, 25 years ago, none of this was here, first of all. There was no legal cannabis industry. It wasn't getting public attention. It was undercover. So,
And if it did get attention, it was negative attention.
Always negative.
Always negative.
Is there anything you wish you knew earlier in your career?
how to negotiate my salary better. Except for that, no. I've always loved what I do. I consider myself incredibly lucky because I know so many of my peers who hate their lives. You know, I have my 50th high school reunion coming up, as sad as that may be. And, you know, I remember usually people like they hate their life, couldn't wait to retire and collect their pensions and all that. And I'm like, I am certainly not ready to do that. I think there's so much more to accomplish, whether it's with cannabis or it extends to the psychedelic era, which is also gaining enormous traction right now. At the end of the day, it's really about education, because the only way you eliminate the stigmas that people have, which have been built in for a long time, is by storytelling and telling the right kind of stories. It's not how high I got or how I saw colors. And it's how it helped my life, how it improved my life.
What about the next generation of people who want to go into PR? Like, what is your advice to them?
To not be lazy. Technology, and now with AI, they think that's how you get your job done, and it's not. The media universe is shrinking on a daily basis. We keep reading about websites closing, mainstream outlets, especially on the local media side, and that is really dangerous. You know, we need local media to report on what's happening in your town and my town and the Board of Elections and all the kind of stuff that the Daily News, New York Times is not covering.
Right.
And that's really what my mission has been and will continue to be. And as long as I'm enjoying what I'm doing and making some money, I don't see retirement in my future. That's the luxury of a consultant. You know, you can pick and I do pick and choose who I work with.
Looking ahead, what do you want your legacy to be? How do you want to be remembered?
Well, personally, obviously, being a parent and having grandchildren, stuff like that. Professionally, not only changing how people perceive cannabis, but having had some role in a lot of Academy Award-winning movies and other public recognition, things like that, that separate me in a way from the competition.
Is there a single moment that stands out in your mind of a pivot that really changed things for you?
Between over and next pivot.
Yeah. So the one area we didn't touch upon is I did dip my fingers into the .com world in the late 90s where I thought I have to give it a shot. I mean, all you kept seeing is people printing money and, you know, executives doing what I do, getting these salaries and packages that were ridiculous. So I did try 2 websites. First was really ahead of itself. It was AI-based. This is in 1998, 99, where let's say they would download you and me, our expertise, and then created a subscription service where for small businesses, they could learn about production from you. They could learn about marketing from me. They had some pretty big names associated with them, and they didn't make it to the second round of financing. And then there was a large incubator based out of Massachusetts called CMGI. At that point, their stock was in the 400s per share. And they were launching an entertainment-based website called iCast, which would highlight movies, television, music, and comedy around the sense of community, which is pre-Facebook. So let's say, Robert, you would upload a song that you wrote and played, and the community would vote on it, and then we would develop talent for the labels. We were the anti-Napster is how we positioned ourselves, because Napster at that time was, you know, ruining the record industry.
Sure. So
the chairman of CMGI swore to me that this site would be alive. He would never let it go. If he shut down other sites, this one would be always there. And they were based in Woburn, Mass. So I would go up there once a week. Made a lot of bad decisions on the marketing side, sponsorships, where to spend money, awards. They burned through $90 million in about 6 to 8 months. Of course, shut down the site, kept me on, transitioned it out, and things like that. And then from there is when I went back to work for Jan Wenner with the whole Us Weekly stuff. It was a great experience. Clearly didn't live up to my or its expectations, but to your point about trying new things and pivoting to what I see as the future, and I had the support of my wife, ex-wife, behind a lot of these moves, which were chancy, but, you know, the upside could be significant. So you just never know, but if you don't try, and that's how I continue to look at things. Who knows what's going to happen next?
You said retirement isn't anytime soon, so share what you think your next chapter is really going to be.
Well, I thought cannabis would be my last chapter. I really did.
But that would be a fulfilling thing for you.
It would be very fulfilling, and it is very fulfilling. And I'm not.
And it's also about the people you're working with.
Yeah. I mean, oh, yeah. And, you know, there certainly still is a challenge in changing people's perceptions and eradicating the stigma. And so until I can successfully do that, we're the towns that opt out, opt in, which is certainly a big problem here in New Jersey.
Well, we'll continue to work on that together, Stu. We appreciate your advocacy, your wisdom, your experience in a newer mainstream space because the conversation around cannabis is going to be continuing, and we're all collectively going to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would certainly have no reservations that this is where I hang my hat at the end of the day, whether it's 5 years from now, perhaps maybe a little shorter, who knows. But once again, I can pick and choose who I work with and how hard I want to work. So perhaps I don't need to have that kind of roster after a while and just, do what I love to do.
And enjoy it.
And that's how I really consider myself very lucky.
Well, Stu, thanks so much for being here. We
Thanks
always
for having me.
Enjoy being around you and hearing what you're up to and what's next.
I do believe people come into your life for a reason, Robert.
Without a doubt.
And we met Stu in 2018 at a Canna Gather. The first time we met him. But we didn't know him. He was a stranger.
Right. Much as we didn't know anybody back then.
It's an impressive group. They are really cool
It's
people.
an impressive group, and it's a lot more compact than you would imagine. It's not a huge industry. It's a tight-knit community that you can get to know a lot of people if you become part of that.
But it's just a matter of showing up. So that's kind of how, when we met Stu, like I said, at first he's a stranger. Now he's become a good friend and someone we like to hang out with.
One of the things that gives Stu, as you know, the advantage in a space like cannabis is his experience in the PR space, because that is second nature to him at this point, just knowing what to do, who to reach out to, which allows him then to really focus his talent on, managing the extra challenges that a cannabis business has.
Well, he's a creative problem solver.
Well, that's it. When we talked about his ability to do this now is because of his vast knowledge that he's accumulated through the decades to be able to do that, right? That's his wisdom that he has gathered that allows him now to be able to help people in such a challenging space.
But
as
because
cannabis.
of the legalization, he's also able to reach and impact more audiences, a broader audience.
You can do that now in the legal cannabis space in ways, obviously, that those who were in the legacy cannabis space, as much as I enjoy the fact that New Jersey has embraced cannabis and it's legal both recreationally and medicinally, and I am a medical cannabis patient, I still feel very strongly about the people who came before, right? The people who were able to provide medicine to those who needed it before the state of New Jersey, and hopefully the country will follow, is that medicine is important. They were there taking care of those who couldn't have access otherwise. So, we always have the legacy market of cannabis in mind.
Well, I'm also proud of our brand and business, Canna Pop-Up, which is what we decided to launch as we learn more about the industry at large and the people involved in the industry.
We've had Stu with us at Canna Pop-Up, which the core of Canna Pop-Up was always education, is always education first, right? The plant itself is so amazing, yet so complex that you need to learn about it. And even the medical profession doesn't fully understand.
But
the
communities
endocannabinoid system.
need to understand it. And it also not only about reducing stigma and fear, it's really about talking about the benefits the plant medicine has for you regarding health and wellness. Yeah. So that is something that is meaningful to you, me, Stu, and so many others that we have gotten to know personally and understand their reasons why they are part of the cannabis world. And it really makes sense to me because the more you learn and the stories you hear, it's really important to continue to spreading the good
And it's obvious after listening to Stu's story from his start to where he is today that he is a trusted, respected mentor, leader in so many professional spaces.
And importantly, he's making a difference. And those are the kind of people we like to hang around.
So we want to thank him for being here. He's very busy these days, so we appreciate him taking the time to be with us.
And we appreciate all of the advances he's done in the world of cannabis.
So thank you again, Stu, and we appreciate you being here, spending time with us on Between Over and Next. Thanks for tuning in to Between Over and Next. We hope you enjoyed this episode and found it meaningful and insightful.
If you value it to be worthwhile, please share it with your friends and family.
We would really appreciate it if you could take a moment to write a review for us. Your feedback will help us continue to create content that resonates with you.
And don't forget, in the show notes, you can find all the relevant links mentioned in this episode, from accessing free downloads to visiting our website and more.
If you have any questions or comments, we would love to hear from you. Simply send us an email. Our email address is hello@hollyandrobert.com. We're always excited to connect with our listeners.
So until next time, thank you again for joining us on Between Over and Next.
Thank you for listening to Between Over and Next, the podcast that navigates the twists and turns of life with courage, laughter, and a whole lot of inspiration. Tune in every Tuesday to hang out with Holli and Robert on your favorite podcast platform. Visit hollyandrobert.com and follow them on social media to ignite your passion and fuel your dreams.